listening to Weagle 91.1 in Auburn, Alabama.
Greetings, Earthling.
Welcome to the Fast Break on WEGL 91.1 FM. I'm JJ Jackson, and every week I'm joined by Chris Williams and Ryan Lavoie. Last week we started our preseason power rankings as we looked around the association. We broke teams down how their roster stands today and gave a preview of their upcoming season and where we thought they ranked amongst the other NBA franchises. On paper, we're not taking into account possibility of injuries or anything of that nature. Last week we talked about the teams ranked 30th through 25th, and today we're going to start off with the 24th team in our opinion, which is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Last season they finished 16-66. They were the last team in the Western Conference that actually controlled the number one overall pick in the draft and selected the big man Karl Anthony Towns out of Kentucky. Guys, what are your thoughts on the Timberwolves going into this upcoming season?
I mean, I immediately feel a lot better about this Minnesota Timberwolves team with the addition of Karl Anthony Towns. This guy came into Kentucky. He wasn't even – a lot of people didn't even think he was our best recruit coming into last year to this team that went 38-1, loses in the Final Four. But Karl Anthony Towns became the go-to guy at Kentucky. I mean, he was everything for that Kentucky team, and he probably put up his numbers could have been so much more at Kentucky. A lot of people are going to look at him and his numbers at Kentucky and say, he could have been better. Why did he go number one if he was only putting up, 15 points a game or whatever? But this guy's going to be a stud. He's going to be definitely a future piece of this Minnesota Timberwolves franchise, right next to Andrew Wiggins and Zach LaVine. I love how young this team is, and if this team stays together and they continue to get better, nobody has any major fallouts or injuries or anything like that, this is a team that a few years down the road is going to be scary.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think when you look at Towns and Wiggins, Zach LaVine, Tyus Jones, this has a potential to be, and I don't know, in 3 or 4 years, one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Obviously, it's hard to plan out what happens in 3 or 4 years, but I definitely think that this is one of the most potential-laden teams in the league. Why Karl Anthony Towns went number one, I would definitely say, would be because of what he can do on the defensive side of the ball. I think everyone would agree that Okafor is a better pure post player, but Towns does have a nice mid-range jump shot and is obviously a great shot blocker. And so I think with this team that fits a lot better because they have Kevin Martin, who defense is a big problem for him, but he's always put in 20 a game. Obviously, we know what Andrew Wiggins can do offensively. So I think for this team, for this year, having a rim protector like Anthony Towns is a better fit for them.
Guys, talk about good timing. I'm not kidding. My phone literally just buzzed with an update from Bleacher Report in the NBA Rumors tab, and Adrian Wojnarowski of Yahoo Sources tweeted out that Minnesota is currently progressing in, quote, contract buyout with former 2013 number one pick Anthony Bennett. And guys, he'd be a free agent if he's able to clear waivers. So just that's just incredible timing that we just started talking about the Timberwolves, and here we get an update that the former number one overall pick, a guy that came over in that Kevin Love trade last offseason, could not be wearing that Timberwolves uniform this season.
I mean, this might not be like huge news. This isn't going to change the Timberwolves this year, except that they'll lose Anthony Bennett. It's going to clear up cap space because, even though he's a number one overall pick, that means he's getting paid. I don't know exactly what his contract is, but probably around $5 million, Ryan. I see you flashing your hand at me. That's the number that was in my head also, is around $5 million of cap space for a guy that played limited minutes for you last year, and that's opening up a space for some. Who I saw on the free agent waiver wire earlier today when I was just scrolling through it? Michael Beasley. I mean, I know he's been up and down, but his last stint in the NBA wasn't bad. And for a young team like Minnesota, if you're looking for a raw talent guy, why not go after him with some money that you're freeing up with Anthony Bennett being off?
Well, remember, Michael Beasley's best part of his career was as a Timberwolf. He actually was one of their key players. Yes, they've struggled the last 4 or 5 years, but he, alongside of Kevin Love, was a pretty formidable front line. I think he had his career high in points playing for the Timberwolves, and so maybe he could spark something again. And like you said, he played pretty well for the Heat when he did get a chance last year.
Yeah, and I mean, you can give him, $1 million, $2 million because he'll take that deal right now, and you still have money to play with. I mean, that's a veteran minimum salary still left over after you sign Michael Beasley. So this is room to work for the Timberwolves. But my biggest question I have on the Timberwolves right now is not in any of their players, but head coach Flip Saunders. We're hoping and we're thinking about Coach Saunders as he is battling cancer right now, but I'm not even sure if he's going to be healthy enough to coach this team this year. That's a huge impact. Your head coach is not going to be there, so who's going to coach this team? How are they going to adapt with their head coach? And he's pretty involved in the in the GM role as well for Minnesota, so that's going to be a big hit.
Do we know who the intern is?
I don't right off the top of my head.
I believe an interim head coach has been. We'll look that up for you all. I believe an interim head coach has been announced, but you're right, Chris. Not having Flip Saunders for a good portion of the season could have an effect on this team and where they hope to go. I think a good word to summarize this team, is potential and, seeing where they go next. When you talk about Zach LaVine and Andrew Wiggins entering their second year of their NBA careers, they've dubbed themselves the Bounce Brothers. Zach LaVine, of course, won last season's dunk contest. You have Kevin Martin and Kevin Garnett, two veteran guys that are going to lead, once again, this young team. And then they bring over another veteran, Andre Miller, to help those point guards out, and draft Tyus Jones, the national champion out of Duke, the Final Four's most outstanding player. A guy that I'm excited to see where he takes his game to is Shabazz Muhammad. He was the 13th overall pick in the 2013 draft, the 14th overall pick, excuse me. He's 22, entering his third season into the league, and we saw last year he was continuing to improve and continuing to be a factor at the NBA level, so it'll be interesting to see where his game goes from here.
Absolutely, and just looking at their roster, something I just kind of put together in my head, they have a mentor for almost all their young players. Look, they've got Andre Miller to help Tyus Jones' development. They've got Kevin Martin to help Zach LaVine continue to grow. And they've got Garnett to develop Karl Anthony Towns, to mentor him. They've actually got a really great mix of veterans and young players. And so, look, I'm concerned that since they don't have head coach Flip Saunders, that the rookies and young players' development their growth might be stunted. But I think when you factor in who they do have with Garnett and Miller backing up Rubio and the veterans that they do have, I do think that they will hopefully be able to survive Flip Saunders not being there. It's always difficult to grow and develop chemistry without your head coach, but I think if there's this is still as good of a situation as could be when you have such a great pro like Kevin Garnett.
Yeah, and all right, so I looked it up. Sam Mitchell, who is a assistant coach for this Minnesota Timberwolves team, is going to be the head coach. Sam Mitchell, a former NBA player, and he played a few years for the Timberwolves, and then also with the Pacers, and then back with the Timberwolves, and then he has been a coach. He's been a head coach before. He won Coach of the Year back in 2007 with the Toronto Raptors, I saw. So this guy knows what he's doing. So they might be okay, and I know as long as he's been with the team, he has those relationships, so they can be okay. But again, we're still just thoughts and prayers go out to Flip Saunders as he's battling this cancer. One last point I want to talk about with the Timberwolves is Gorgui Dieng. I think this guy he's still developing. A couple years out of Louisville where he won a national championship. I think he has a lot of potential and could potentially take the starting center role for this Timberwolves team. It'd be like, and let Towns play the 4, because I think Towns can do that.
I get the feeling that with the news that was just broken about Anthony Bennett, that they have chosen Gorgui Dieng as another big man over Anthony Bennett. I kind of under that impression because obviously if you have Anthony Towns, you only need one more frontline guy, and I feel like they've gone with Dieng over that. So now we're going to turn to the Detroit Pistons.
Yep.
Next in the rankings, and they have one of the premier rebounders, shot blockers in the league, and Andre Drummond. And they have Brandon Jennings, but they're looking like they're wanting to move Brandon Jennings. So, guys, what do you think of the Detroit Pistons?
I think there's a lot of questions surrounding the Pistons right now, honestly. I mean, you give up Greg Monroe and let him walk in free agency, and you're putting all your eggs in one basket, essentially, and trusting Andre Drummond, hoping that he's going to stay in a couple of years whenever he becomes a free agent, which I don't know if that's a secured situation. I don't know if they want to keep Brandon Jennings or not because they signed Reggie Jackson. There's a lot of people that think that the Pistons are going to try to run Reggie Jackson at the point guard and let Brandon Jennings be a shooting guard. There's a lot of people that think they're committing to Reggie Jackson and they're okay with letting Brandon Jennings walk after this year. There's a lot that can happen there. I like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I think he's a really good shooting guard. I think he's one of the better young players in the league right now. Stanley Johnson wasn't my favorite draft pick on draft night. He's probably one of my least favorite in the lottery as far as just fit with the team where he went. I thought he was going to go maybe a spot back because I figured Justice Winslow would be off the board earlier. I thought Stanley Johnson would have gone to Miami, and that would have been a good situation. But we'll see. I know that there's a lot of excitement around Ersan Ilyasova coming over from the Bucks, and that he's going to play the 4 position and help spread the floor a little bit and let Andre Drummond really command the paint. So we'll see how that goes. But I just don't see this team being, still very good.
It is going to be interesting to see, what does happen with Brandon Jennings, and I think that's going to be what a lot of the talk is throughout the season. If this is a guy that's leaving or is going to be a free agent at the end of the season and you acquired a guy like Reggie Jackson at the trade deadline, then your initial thought is, hey, we need to trade Brandon Jennings because he's very talented. He was playing so well for them, and the team was really in that 7-8 seed contention in the Eastern Conference before Jennings had that Achilles injury. So why not trade him and get something in return before he just leaves you in free agency?
I agree. I think when I look at this team, the biggest concern I have is that they don't have anyone that passes the ball. I think that's why they're trying to get rid of Brandon Jennings, because Jennings is a score-first point guard. Reggie Jackson's a score-first point guard. Caldwell Pope is a prototypical shooting guard in that he shoots and does not pass. And Marcus Morris does not pass. And so, this whole team is filled with guys that do not pass. And so there's going to be a lot of isolation, and no offense, but I don't think that Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris and Andre Drummond isolating is going to get you very far. It's one thing for a LeBron James to isolate, a Kevin Durant to isolate. They can do that all they want. But for Reggie Jackson to isolate 25 times a game, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and is there anything exciting about adding Steve Blake and Aaron Baines, Danny Granger, adding him? These aren't moves that make me believe that the Pistons are trying to make it to the playoffs this year. This is to me, this looks like, Stan. I believe in Stan. I think he is a very good coach. I think he's a very smart man, and I think he knows that he's still working on something right now. And we'll probably, if it's just my personal opinion, this has nothing to do with where we power rank them. We're power ranking them as this roster right now. But I think we see Brandon Jennings move with that expiring contract to a playoff contender before the season's up, and either trying to acquire young talent or future draft picks. I think that's what the Pistons are going to do, probably another one this season, and maybe have to do it again next season.
And Aaron Baines, the fact that, he played in spurts for that Spurs team that won the championship in 2014, he signed a 3-year, $20 million contract.
That's a lot of money.
For somebody that's coming off the bench, you're right, Chris, that's a lot of money to be paying him. And I know that, Stan Van Gundy serves the role as head coach, and Jeff Bauer technically is referred to as their general manager, but as the president, Stan Van Gundy gets the final say, and he's doing all the personnel moves. So that's really, guys, just a head-scratcher for me that he has to see something in Aaron Baines that we don't. I know the Spurs saw something in them because they're known for going after those foreign European talent and that kind of thing. And Baines played well in spurts when he needed to, but I never saw him as a guy that you're going to throw $20 million at.
Yeah, I agree. Look, Baines is still a young, developing player. Could he blossom into that? Maybe.
Oh,
yeah, sure.
There's potential.
But also, if you've got Drummond, okay, he's not playing center because Andre Drummond's I think an underrated player in the league. He's consistently one of the league's leading rebounders and block shots, and so he's not getting his spot. And is he really a power forward? I mean, I thought he was 7 foot tall and kind of a center only. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they're doing there. Maybe is that a sign that down the low they're going to give up on Drummond and try and trade him away?
I don't know off the top of my head how much Drummond has left, but if they don't lock him up, maybe it's a security blanket in case Drummond leaves them in a couple years. He doesn't re-sign with the Pistons. I don't know. But we're going to have to take our first break. When we come back, we're moving on to the next teams in our list, and those are 2 more Eastern Conference teams. We'll let you decide who you think they're going to be, and we'll talk about those 2 teams when we come back in just a minute. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Weagle 91.1.